nonprofit advocacy group for the St. Johns River.
And our mission is to help protect the river.
Hello, welcome once again to the St. Johns Riverkeeper Show, the most exciting half hour on television. I'm Jimmy Orritt, the Executive Director of St. Johns Riverkeeper, and I'm here with my co-host, Neil Armingjon, your St. Johns Riverkeeper.
Jimmy, I want to tell all the listeners out there, our watchers, that I'm playing hurt today. I have a cold, so if I sound kind of stopped up, forgive me.
Yeah, so we appreciate Neil actually getting himself up out of bed and coming in to join us today and having a smile on his face to boot. So thanks, Neil, for coming in here, because there's some really important issues that we want to talk about. Neil felt that they're obviously so important that he was going to limp on in here today and help us out and to understand this a little better. But before we get started, Neil, as you know, I always like to give our guests out there, that the viewers that may not know who we are and what we do, a little bit of background information about St. Johns Riverkeeper. So could you maybe give us a little overview about the organization? Sure,
Jimmy. We're a citizens group, 501c3 nonprofit. We're located here in Jacksonville. Our main focus is the health and preservation of the St. Johns River, but we're working, Jimmy, and we'll hear later on, all over the state, really, on issues that impact your St. Johns River. We kind of do our business through education, outreach, educating people about how to become parts of the decisions that are being made every day about the river, and holding polluters accountable. So we're around the clock trying to take care of the St. Johns River.
And I like to say, you know, there's a couple of things that really summarize, I think, very quickly and concisely what we do. One, we like to think of ourselves as an independent voice for the St. Johns River.
Right.
And two, some people like to characterize us as a watchdog group. So we're there looking out for your river and serving as the river's voice and your voice, representing the best interests of the river. And I also like to say that we don't have an agenda other than what's best for the St. Johns River. And so it's very simple. We're out there working every day to try to work towards a clean and healthy river. And as you mentioned, holding polluters accountable, but also holding regulatory agencies, making sure that they're doing their job, they're implementing the law, they're enforcing the law, and that we have laws that adequately protect the river, and standards. And so that leads into an issue that we actually talked about on the last show. It's an issue that is critical for the future of the river, and that is the nutrient, and we'll get into all this, what this means, but numeric nutrient standards.
Right.
Neil, you want to give us a little bit of overview about what that is and what it means for the future of the river?
Well, as an organization, we have been working on nutrient issues. Nutrients are nitrogen and phosphorus. They are in effect natural. They're part of nature, but when they're used in too much abundance or reach our waterways that are in levels that are very heavy, they cause what we call the green monster, algae blooms. And what people have been hearing about this so-called EPA ruling, and yesterday you and I and Kelly were in Tallahassee for a series of public meetings, hearings, if you will. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has stepped in as part of a consent decree, an agreement, if you will, with St. Johns Riverkeeper for other environmental groups to develop a meaningful nutrient reduction program for our state. The state has been dilly-dallying, I guess I would describe it, Jimmy, for 12 years to come up with some program that we could believe in and would begin to improve the health of the river, and they have failed. So the EPA has stepped in to establish, it's something called numeric nutrient standards. What I like to tell people, it's really an understandable level of nitrogen and phosphorus that can be put into our waterways.
Well, I like it, Neil, the analogy that you use with the speed limit signs.
Right.
And I think that's a good way to...
Right. The way I would describe it, Jimmy, is let's say we're driving down Phillips Highway, which is close to here. We looked up and the speed limit sign says, drive at a safe speed. Well, we're all thinking we know what that is, And frankly, the good news about that is there wouldn't be any enforcement because it's unenforceable. What the EPA is doing...
And that's what we have currently.
Right, that's what we have currently. We have, in effect, a process that is unenforceable, in effect, a failure, in my opinion. So we're going from this nebulous drive at whatever speed you think is appropriate to what we're all used to, speed limit's 35. We understand it, we can use it, and most importantly, from our viewpoint, Jimmy, it's enforceable. Sadly, none of us like to be in a speed trap, but we know what the speed limit is. So if you're driving 70 in a 35 zone, you know you're violating the law. We, as I mentioned yesterday, just an incredible day in Tallahassee. Hundreds of people spoke. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the people that spoke spoke in opposition to these important numeric standards. And frankly, it's because of self-interest or self-serving. They like where we are now, which is no one really understands how much nitrogen is going into waterways in this state, and that's why we're in the shape that we're in.
Yeah, it was interesting, Neil. Some of the, what I would characterize as being frankly outlandish comments made by some of the industry groups that are opposed to it.
Right.
For instance, stating that we don't need to do anything. What we have now is working.
Yeah.
And obviously,
everything's fine.
If you live in the Jacksonville area and you've been around the river, especially during the summertime, the last few summers, going back to, you know, really 2000, well, it's happened longer than that, but if you go back to 2005 and since then, you've seen what, you know, Neil talked about, the green monster, the widespread algal blooms that have covered and blanketed the river, which we've talked on previous shows can cause damage to the environment, to the health of the waterways, to the fish and wildlife species, but it also can be detrimental to the health of humans because of the toxic, the toxins that they can release. And also something I mentioned yesterday at the hearing, it also impacts local businesses. And we've talked to numerous businesses whose business was dramatically impacted by the algal blooms, such as people that have marine-related businesses.
Boating, fishing.
And so, you know, yesterday everybody was complaining about that this is going to cost money to implement, but they failed to mention the people that it's already implementing now, that a dirty, unhealthy waterway is impacting their business. And so I think what we're saying is, you know, it was interesting too, Neil, another point real quick. I had a reporter I talked to and I was making that point to him and he said, Jimmy, I understand what you're saying and I agree with you, but that's really not really the important issue here, is it? It's really that this is the law, this is the right thing to do, is to clean up our waterways, and that is really the ultimate point.
And you know, Jimmy, the thing that we mentioned at the beginning of the show, one of our jobs is to go to these meetings and represent, if you will, the river. Because I can assure you the vast speaking agenda that is being told to the EPA is not about what's best for not only the St. Johns River, our springs, literally, you know, the sad news is, Jimmy, over 50% of the streams in this state are impaired. We're now seeing...
You sound like a bureaucrat now.
Well, polluted. Polluted.
I think that's the thing that we need to make sure people understand when we say that.
You know, we were there, and other citizens. I mean, I understand it's not easy to take a day off from work and drive to Tallahassee. And, you know, frankly, Jimmy, I spoke to some citizens and just said, you know, it's kind of overwhelming. You go into this big room, there are all these people, most of which have no interest in protecting any waterway. And so one of my jobs, one of our jobs, is to go to those meetings and speak up on behalf of the river and those of us who love the river, and really the importance of the river to the community. There are hearings. There was a hearing in Tallahassee I mentioned, Orlando, and then finally in South Florida, West Palm. There are ways that you watching can help the river. You can go to our website. There's a fact sheet, and in that fact sheet is a way you can email the EPA. And it's